MEMS technology is basically almost probably billions of people are carrying it on their person every day in the form of their phone. It's in their cars, it's in their phones, it's in medical life-saving equipment, it's in industrial equipment. So there's not really an awareness.
How does that make you feel? But especially, you've experienced the inflection point of MEMS.
I found my way into this field by accident, and it's kind of a happy accident. The fastest way to become a leader is to start your own company. You cannot design or create a semiconductor chip in your garage or at your kitchen table. We build prototypes, but usually we can capture additional IP and additional patents, which our clients own. One of our challenges as product developers is interruption in funding and long pauses.
So how did it come to place that you would create Fitzgerald Associates? How did that happen?
We thought the world's tiniest pressure sensor that is now in FDA-approved invasive cardiology equipment. We were working on quantum sensors more than 10 years ago. Some of those are orbiting the Earth right now. So ultrasound is, I think, enormously important, but I think there's a lot of new and exciting applications in there. We can pull the copper wiring out of our computer rack. We can have massive power savings, like up to the tune of 30 or 40%. But in business, unlike in engineering, you can't measure everything. There is risk to taking too long to make a decision. Gotta go now. I want to go see it. It's a remarkably beautiful, alien, wonderful place. And I love snow and ice and the wild outdoors, and it just made my heart sing.
Join us as we welcome Dr. Alissa M. Fitzgerald, a distinguished leader and innovator in MEMS engineering.
With over 3 decades of experience and degrees from MIT and Stanford, Alissa has been at the forefront of Micro-Electro-Mechanical Systems. As founder and CEO of Fitzgerald Associates, LLC, she expertly guides MEMS product development from concept to commercialization.
Her unparalleled expertise is crucial for understanding the intricate world of sensors and their profound impact on future technology. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome back to the Semiconductor Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Salah Nasri, and it's great to have you back here. So, whether you are a industry veteran or someone that's just curious about semiconductor manufacturing, this is your podcast. Today is a very special day. What I would like to present to you is a lady who is notorious in the MEMS and sensors world. Yeah, I mean, look, she brings over 30 years of MEMS engineering experience, degrees from MIT and Stanford. She's a co-author of MEMS product development from concept to commercialization, a book that you should definitely go on Amazon, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, you can buy her book there. Inducted into the MSIG Hall of Fame, 2024 Census Converge Executive of the Year, and she's a board of director of Rigetti Computing, and I know the CEO very well, Subodh Kulkarni, shout out to him, and IEEE Spectrum Editorial Advisory Board. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in this podcast with Alissa Fitzgerald. Alissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Salah. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Alissa, I mean, we've just participated or partaken in this MEMS and Sensors World Summit. And I think one of the interesting things that kind of popped out from the show was this perspective of awareness that, we're not out there like the rest of the fancy technologies in the world.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? But especially, you've experienced the inflection point of MEMS.
Yeah, no, I think it's a challenge. And, we discussed that in the panel yesterday, right? I mean, MEMS technology is basically almost probably billions of people are carrying it on their person every day in the form of their phone.
Right.
Most people in the Western world, they're interacting with MEMS technology every day, and they don't realize it, right? And it's in their cars, it's in their phones, it's in medical life-saving equipment, it's in industrial equipment. So there's not really an awareness. And we were discussing that yesterday at the conference, that, is it a marketing problem? It's a branding problem. This technology enables so much functionality, but still not a lot of people have heard about it. So I think most people would say that's a marketing issue.
For sure. And yeah, fair play. And for talking about marketing issue, I'm pretty sure I'm going to take a guess. I'm not, just saying there's a decent amount of people that are watching this or this podcast who don't even know what MEMS are or what MEMS is.
Right.
Could you give us a MEMS for Dummies outline for one word?
So the acronym itself stands for Micro-Electro-Mechanical Systems. That's quite a mouthful. It's a class of silicon-based sensor or actuator microtechnology. The name, I think, is intentionally broad because MEMS is really a manufacturing technology. About 40 to 50 years ago, some really innovative semiconductor engineers started playing around with the processes normally used to make computer chips. And instead, they tried to use those same fabrication processes to make micro-mechanical devices. And that was, how this industry was born. So it's very wide-ranging. It encompasses a bunch of different types of devices. So I think we've always had this naming problem. It's a very big circus tent. We also have microfluidics. There's some religious debate about whether that's a MEMS or not. Anyway, but it is a micro-electromechanical systems. It is really a manufacturing technology, and we can make all kinds of amazing micro and nanoscale devices on silicon wafers using this technology.
Brilliant. Thank you. What's interesting as well is that, just like myself, I'm making another assumption here.
Mm-hmm.
I got into this industry purely by accident. Mm-hmm. Looking at your academic experience, I mean, you went to marvelous universities, MIT and Stanford. But you studied aeronautics and astronautics.
Well, I also found my way into this field by accident. And it's kind of a happy accident. But yes, I started my career in aerospace engineering. I was super inspired by NASA and the space shuttle program when I was a teenager, and wanted to be an astronaut for a while. Mm-hmm. So studied aerospace engineering and had my first job out of university working for a company that was building rockets and spacecraft. And then I decided I wanted to go back for a PhD. And at the time, this was in the mid-90s, there were some avant-garde efforts in small satellites. And I thought this was a fantastic idea. So I wanted to go do a PhD on small satellite technology. And and that was one of the reasons I was attracted to Stanford. But when I got there, there was no funding available for PhD students working on small satellites. So I had to cast about to find, some of the way to fund my degree program. And one of the professors in the aerospace department turned me on to a then young professor who was in mechanical engineering, Tom Kenny, who had just started a research program on MEMS. And I had no idea what that was, but, they said, oh, well, he's working on tiny sensors for deep space spacecraft. And I said, oh, I heard spacecraft, good enough. Let me check that out. And one of the happy miracles of my career was that I was visiting Stanford. I wasn't living in California at the time, and they said, "Oh, go talk to Tom Kenny." And one of the small miracles of my career is that he was in his office when I happened by, and we were able to have a chat. And I was like, "Okay, this sounds really interesting." And I stayed in the field because, it's a fascinating multidisciplinary technology, and actually aerospace education and degree translates very well to MEMS because aerospace is itself a very multidisciplinary effort. It involves, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, all kinds of multi-physics, fluid dynamics, thermal, etc. And we have all those same problems and all those same challenges in MEMS. So I actually feel that my aerospace engineering degree prepared me well for for the MEMS industry.
Wow. So tell us about your path. So you're MIT and Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
What did you feel? What were the differences about them? Well, what do they? I mean, I'm sure they both hold a special place in your heart because that's your academic days.
Yeah.
But what was the difference about those two?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So they're both excellent universities, but they do have very different cultures and approaches to education. And what I really value about my education at MIT is that it taught me to think and to break down really tricky problems into solvable problems. And that discipline and that rigor, it carries through my entire career. And, I used to say that, typical experience for an MIT undergrad is on Monday, you get a problem set from the professor and you look at it and you say, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to start to solve this problem.
Right.
And by Friday, you figured it out. And so you get confronted constantly with these difficult challenges, but you learn how to break them down and find your way through it. And that was really, what I got out of MIT. At Stanford, Stanford lit the flame for entrepreneurship for me, and probably for you as well. You spent some time there. But also at Stanford, I learned a lot of really practical hands-on skills and, having access to the Stanford nanofabrication facility where I learned to handle and process wafers. I mean, that experience enabled my business. And then coupled with the excitement of entrepreneurship and the local ecosystem. So both excellent universities, very different experiences, which I both cherish.
Marvelous. So how did it come to place that you would create AM Fitzgerald and Associates? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate that earlier in my career, I had a number of different work experiences. So I got to work for a very large defense contractor and experienced sort of corporate engineering. I spent some time at JPL as a summer intern, so I got to see what the government lab experience looked like. And then after I finished my PhD at Stanford, I worked for a startup that at the time was trying to commercialize CMUT or micro-ultrasound technology for medical imaging. So I kind of got the trifecta of big company, government lab, and small companies or startup. But, as I just described, like Stanford kind of fanned that flame of entrepreneurship. And I think part of what fanned that flame was a frustration I felt when I was inside a large company, as well as inside a small company, that I felt like I wanted to do it better kind of thing. Like there was aspects of those experiences where I felt I could do it better. I wanted to be a leader. And, to be honest, it was a frustration as a young person and probably like, typical like arrogant young person. You feel like you have all the solutions or you can solve all the problems in the world. I was like, surely there must be a way to create a better work environment, more inclusive and more inspiring work environment. But I was like, well, do I want to put in 20 or 30 years of hard time to like crawl my way up the corporate ladder before I could get to the CEO chair? And as you well know, the fastest way to become a leader is to start your own company.
Right.
So I basically short-circuited the typical career path and said, you know what, I want to go out on my own and start my own company, and I'll be a leader. And and so that was the genesis.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank
How
you.
many years is it now?
22 years now.
22 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when I started my company, it was just myself for 3 years.
Wow.
First 3 years, it was solo practice. And over time, started to add folks first as contractors and part-timers, and then now have a full-time team.
So your business model leverages, correct me if I'm wrong, university fabs to build and validate prototypes.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued to, of course, understand is how did you forge those relationships, and then, of course, value. And what value does that, of course, that model bring to like the corporate world, the key players?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, our university fabs, whether here in the USA or elsewhere, are just incredible resources for technology innovation.
Okay.
You cannot design or create a semiconductor chip in your garage or at your kitchen table. You need access to one of these facilities. And a lot of the innovation that occurs in our field is occurring at the wafer level. You can't yet fully simulate it, et cetera. So you have to get into the lab and build the wafers and run the processes. The universities open their fabs to industrial users such as my company and others. It's a wonderful model because for me as a business leader, I have access to a $50 or $100 million facility that is not on my balance sheet that I pay for by the minute of usage per month. So for an entrepreneur, and there's many other small companies and large companies that have benefited from this shared access model, you get access to a top research environment and, equipment that you'll also find in a foundry, but you're not having this huge capital outlay. You're paying for it as a variable expense. So my business model, we are a fabless company that does fab work, right? And that's completely enabled by the university shared access model, which Stanford has, which Berkeley has. I spent 4 years as a graduate student working in the Stanford nanofabrication facility. So I knew all the staff there. I knew how everything worked there. So when I went to start my company, I went back to the Stanford lab management that I knew, and I explained what I was about to do. I was not the first person to do this, right? So they already had a system for allowing industrial companies to come in. So when the business started, we were working at Stanford, and then when my current company chief operating officer, Carolyn White, joined the company, she was a Berkeley grad, and she had all those relationships at Berkeley. And in 2008, I believe it was, Berkeley built a brand new 6-inch fab. And that was a strategic decision for us, was to move to, the brand new facility at Berkeley, move our operations from Stanford over to Berkeley to take advantage of the 6-inch wafer and all the shiny new equipment that was there. So right now we're operating in Berkeley and occasionally in Davis as well.
Marvelous. So could you walk us through the journey of a typical MEMS project, for example? So from concept to wafer manufacturing, and of course, what we would love to hear is, what are the biggest hurdles one would see?
Yes, yeah. So we intercept clients at all stages of product development. Of course, our favorite project is when the customer comes in with, we need a sensor or an actuator to do X, Y, Z. Here's our specs, and we get to start from a blank sheet of paper, and go all the way from there to the foundry and to manufacturing. That's the beauty. That's the most wonderful birth to manufacturing scenario. We don't always get to do the full life cycle. Normally, we're intercepting the customer at some point in their product development, usually at TRL 3 or 4, and they've done some proof of concept prototype, and we're coming in to help ruggedize their design and their process and streamline it for the manufacturing environment. And because a lot of MEMS start in academic labs, which don't have the equipment and discipline of manufacturing, there's quite a bit of translation and re-engineering that has to occur. But start to finish is usually, a 2-year project, could be a bit shorter for less complex technologies. But we have a discipline in our company. It's a multi-stage process to, basically climb up the technology readiness ladder and prepare that technology to create. We build prototypes. That is a very valuable exercise, not only for validating our designs, but usually we can capture additional IP and additional patents, which our clients own. That's part of our model, that the clients will own everything. And then we have a very structured way. We've been doing this a long time, and it's also captured in our book. We have a structured way of bringing the customer along to save them money, save them time, and try to get the best product we can into the foundry. The biggest challenges we see along the way are usually not technical. They are almost always financial on the customer side. Whether the customer is a startup or a giant multinational, one of our challenges as product developers is interruption in funding and long pauses between sort of sections of the project. As companies have challenges, they have to put R&D budgets on hold, circumstances change, startups have trouble raising the B round. So one of the biggest challenges for everybody is not having enough funding to see the effort, funding or budget approved, to see the effort through to whatever their end state is. So we often have to deal with interruptions of months, sometimes even a year. And as every engineer knows, if you stop thinking about a problem for 2 months, 6 months, or a year, there's a huge startup cost to getting that flywheel spun up again. And it's very wasteful. It's wasteful in terms of time. You lose connection with the supply chain that you might have built up, et cetera, and you have to kind of redo a lot of work. So one thing that we, for the audience that's listening out there, if you're interested in developing a MEMS device, please come talk to us about what you intend to do and what your goal is, because we can advise you on how much money do you need, how do you prepare your investors or your executives for the timeline so that, you can get the budget you need so this development can start and run as efficiently as possible.
I'd be intrigued from your whole career, and you must have worked on some quite cool projects.
Yeah.
Which one of them has stood out for you? Which one of the projects stands out for you?
It's hard to say that there's a single one. We have been involved in a lot of really exciting and important technology. Unfortunately, a lot of it we can't talk about publicly and we can't name names. But I can say broadly, we have designed what at the time was we thought the world's tiniest pressure sensor, that is now in FDA-approved invasive cardiology equipment.
Wow.
We have worked on atomic clocks more than 10 years ago. I think there's a lot of talk right now about quantum sensors. We were working on quantum sensors more than 10 years ago. Some of those are orbiting the Earth right now. We are building components that are going into very high-tech laser instrumentation, cutting-edge genomic microfluidics for doing all manner of, DNA analysis or proteomic analysis for drug discovery. So we have worked on technologies that are in many different industries and helping data get moved around in data centers, saving lives, improving understanding of the world through scientific research, drug discovery, et cetera. So it's been really rewarding. And I think that's also what motivates our team, is that the work we're doing is really making a difference out there.
And let's say, as you mentioned early on, what does you and your team, let's say, for example, there's someone out there, they've got an idea, they've got some experience in MEMS, and instead of going directly to a fab to deal with them directly or with an R&D institute, why AM Fitzgerald Associates?
Yeah, so unless the team, whatever the company is, whether it's a startup or a large company, unless the team is really experienced with the manufacturing of MEMS and the interactions with the foundries, et cetera, they could probably use our help. So we have found even customers that have very experienced MEMS folks, like if they haven't seen the whole product development cycle, they could still benefit from our help. So for startup companies, actually it's startups or large companies, if you are an expert in some kind of product or end use application, but you're not an expert in sensor technology or MEMS, come to us, because we can be your partner and your collaborator. And when you can put together the expertise on the end market and the product with our chip design and development expertise, that's when the magic really happens. And that's when we have had incredibly successful products and projects. Because, we don't know everything about all different types of medical devices. We're not drug discovery pharmacologists. So we can't know all of the problems and all of the challenges. But when we work with someone who knows that and understands what they're trying to achieve, and we can listen to what they're trying to do and develop that into a spec for a device, whether it's a sensor or actuator or microfluidic, whatever, then literally we can make the magic happen. We can deliver the chip that is going to give them the functionality that they need for their product to succeed or for them to reach their goal.
I see.
Yeah.
That's why you got to reach out to AM Fitzgerald and Associates.
Thank you. Thank you for the commercial.
Commercial. What really caught my interest, and when I was looking at your resume, or let's say bio, as one would say, is you serve on the board of Rigetti Computing.
Yeah, I do.
And I've been there. I've seen the work that they do. I've seen the technology. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool stuff. What parallels or intersections do you see between the quantum computing world and the MEMS world, if any?
Yeah. Well, I obviously can't comment on any specifics going on inside Rigetti, but one thing that I'm seeing, and this is another thing that makes MEMS very exciting, is that MEMS touches many adjacent technology areas, and it touches several quantum computing architectures. So Rigetti is focused on the superconducting Josephson junction. There are probably at least 6 or 8 other architectures being pursued by various companies and organizations. And MEMS intersects with many of those because they are creating MEMS-like structures. They are working with thin film materials. They are trying to do chip or wafer level integration. And they are, whether they're realizing it or not, using MEMS lithographic materials, deposition and etch techniques, etc. So MEMS is, I commented on this yesterday at the conference. It is a breeding ground for lots of exciting adjacent technologies, and quantum computing is one of them.
From your perspective, Alissa, I think the best question I'd love to ask you is what is it that you love about your job? What is it that you love about the work that you do, your career?
Yeah, it's been 22 years, and I still get out of bed with excitement in the morning and like to go to the office. And I had jobs in the past where that was definitely not the case. Where Monday came around and I was like, oh God, no, I gotta go. And so it's, what really gets me still excited about our company and what we do, as well as, this larger industry and the community of people working in the MEMS and MEMS adjacent areas, is the problems are, as a technologist, very exciting, very interesting, and they are all pushing towards solving real world problems, right? Like these tiny MEMS devices, which your average consumer has no idea is doing work for them. They're making our lives better. They're saving lives. They're helping to diagnose disease. They are helping us understand more about our environment. We're making industrial operations more efficient. It's a purpose, right? And as a technologist, I think most engineers, their desire is we love to create, we love to invent, and we want to do so with purpose and to do some good in the world and to have a lasting effect. And that is I think what motivates most of our team at AM Fitzgerald, and we're privileged to get to do that for our daily work. So I am constantly excited by the challenges the customers bring to us, meeting the new people, learning about, parts of industry that I had no idea even existed, and trying to help them solve their problems. So it's really gratifying. And it's, the service business is not for everybody, right? Certainly a lot of engineers want to develop their own product from start to finish, but then you really just focus on that one product for years and years of your career. And so I actually prefer to see many, and we have seen hundreds of different products, and that's been very gratifying.
Marvelous. So then the counter question is, what do you hate about your job, your career?
Well, let's see. It's April 17th. We all just had to deal with tax filing here in the United States. And that's something even though, you have an accounting staff and CPAs, et cetera, that kind of financial administrative stuff is sort of always unavoidable. So I wouldn't say hate is a strong word. I would say tedious administrative stuff that the CEO must handle, even despite, the kind of folks they have working for them. Yeah, that's can sometimes be a little soul deadening, but it's got to get done. I mean, it's just like in life at home. You got to pay your bills. You got to get the roof fixed. We all have those annoying tasks we have to deal with.
I agree. That's actually a very daunting task. It is it's a mundane thing.
Yes, but it's, the way I look at it is, no one can have a job that is 100% fun and games all the time. Your goal is to try to keep the tedious and not fun part of it well below 50% of your time.
True. And they don't teach you that as well. That's the interesting part. You don't get taught that at university.
Yeah.
Even at a corporate job, you don't get taught that, I think.
No, that's right. I do feel that, I think that it's interesting. You've done a business education. I do feel like there is some at least emphasis for leadership. Correct. I read a lot of leadership books about making sure that you as a leader are spending your time on the important problems and you're delegating everything else away. Correct. And yes, that is something that all leaders should do. But I think that message doesn't always get out to everyone else.
No. Or even just understand. I mean, I learned how to do a P&L just on the go. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, of course, they teach you this at leadership programs, how to analyze a P&L and etc.
Yeah.
But I think, in terms of normal education,
yeah,
I think in nowadays, kids should be taught finance in class.
I 100% agree with
P&L,
you.
they should be taught.
They should get it in
how
high
to
school.
fly. They should get it in high school.
They should get it in
which
school.
codes you got to follow. This is what this means. This is what that means.
Yeah, just basic financial management. And honestly, running your home is the same as running a business. A home has a P&L as well.
Right.
But yeah, we're off topic.
I'm sorry.
But I think that needs to be taught in the high school level. Yeah.
Absolutely. So as MEMS devices, of course, become more integral to life, consumer electronics, IoT, automotive, and healthcare, what are the key challenges out there that remain to be solved, do you feel?
So you're talking about challenges in MEMS or
In
like
MEMS.
big challenges in the world or
in MEMS applications.
MEMS applications.
Where MEMS can go in.
Oh, give that some thought.
Or I could say maybe maybe we could relate it to like, where do you see potential target applications for startups or even maybe established players in MEMS that's being neglected or not being focused on, do you think?
Oh, well, if I had a sharp answer to that, I'd probably run off and fundraise and start another company for that, whatever that product might be. But let's see. I mean, I think, I can talk about like what we're seeing a lot of activity in right now. And what I would say there's some general consensus about what are good problems to be working on if you're in MEMS technology right now. So ironically, one that I started on 25 years ago before I started my company is ultrasound technology.
Yeah.
So there's already a few companies out there that are trying to create handheld ultrasound transducers to really get sophisticated imaging closer to doctors' offices, ambulances, et cetera. Like right now, a lot of people have experienced an ultrasound image. They have to wheel a giant cart to you. You need a trained sonographer to get a good image. So I'm excited about MEMS ultrasound technology democratizing access to, sophisticated diagnostic imaging equipment. And then perhaps AI can one day help us to augment what the sonographer normally does so that, an EMT or a doctor working in a rural area can get an accurate image and accurate diagnosis. So ultrasound is, I think, enormously important, not just for medical imaging, but it's got a lot of industrial uses and for, gesture recognition, range finding. I certainly appreciate the ultrasound sensors in my car, the backup sensors for your bumper. And there's even more, like interesting applications for touch panels, et cetera. So I think ultrasound is an area, it's an old technology. It's been around for a long time, but I think there's a lot of new and exciting applications in there, also from medical treatments, not just for imaging, but for medical treatments. And then the other thing that's really hot in Silicon Valley right now is MEMS components for optoelectronics for data centers, right? We all appreciate the value of data centers. We need more and more of them. They consume huge amounts of electrical power. And someone had done a study, I don't know what the original source was, that if we can pull the copper wiring out of our computer racks and out of data centers and put fiber optics instead, we can have massive power savings, like to the tune of 30 or 40%. Lots of advantages to working with photons instead of electrons. And there's a lot of opportunity for MEMS to be integrated, MEMS components be integrated into those optoelectronic devices. So that's I think a very hot area right now, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there, and we're seeing startups are forming to address those emerging markets.
Right. Marvelous. So any ideas out there?
Yeah.
We're going to give it a cut.
Yeah. Well, again, one thing that's great about our model and why people should work with us is that you will own whatever we invent for you, right? Wow. And so we have that was a philosophy from very early on, was that we weren't going to try to retain rights or charge royalties. We're going to let the customer own the IP. But they will pay for that, of course, but what we see is that the way chips are developed, where you have to transfer the technology to a foundry, right, the client really does have to control their IP to be able to get it through the whole supply chain and out into the product world.
Alissa, with everything that you know now, everything that you've been through, everything that you've gone through, everything that you've been through, if you could turn time back to the Alissa that just come out of MIT or Stanford,
Yeah.
what would you guide her? What guidance would you give her? What would you say to her?
Oh, let's see. I might have advised her to get an MBA.
Okay.
Yeah, because I did not have a formal business education, right? I got a PhD, which is a fantastic educational experience. But I have been filling in on the business side sort of ad hoc, right? Self-study and going to lectures and things like that. So by the time I got rolling with my business, I felt like I couldn't stop out to do something like that. So I think that would have been helpful. But let's see. I think the other piece of advice I would have given my young self is make decisions faster. And I think that's a general tenet for leadership. You can't. You've got to do diligence and thinking and analysis, but in business, unlike in engineering, you can't measure everything. You can't know all the variables. And I think one challenge is, and I can say this as an engineer, one challenge is engineers have going into business is we come from this environment where you can measure and figure out and derive and simulate and reduce risk. And you can't do that in business, right? You just will never know everything. Conditions are constantly changing. There's exogenous factors going on. I mean, we're experiencing that right now, right? So engineers, we tend to be slow and methodical. In business, you do have to move a lot faster. And in hindsight, I think there were a lot of decisions and things that I probably should have made a bit faster and done a bit faster. Hindsight's always 20/20, but I do attribute part of that to not having been a business person, but an engineer and taking an engineering approach to business. But the transition I've made in the last 22 years is finally have completed the transformation and have a more business approach to things of can't measure everything, can't know everything, but time is going. There is risk to taking too long to make a decision. Got to go now.
What do you think was the key thing that made you prolong decisions, would you say? What was the...
Oh, I think just having an analytical nature. Yeah, just wanting to...
Nothing to do with fear of failure or fear of making the wrong decision?
Of course. I mean, that's human nature. Yeah. Well, done to call that out. I think everybody feels that to some degree. But yeah, I mean, there's always, business is always about risk, and it's about risk management. And yeah, I think there was probably some engineering instincts to try to analyze and maybe overanalyze to reduce risk. Yeah.
Alissa, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. I do require a round 2 session, if you don't mind.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
I'd like to delve in a little bit more deeper in terms of the technologies and experiences that you had.
Yeah.
We have a tradition where the last person leaves a question for the next person. And that was a big breath that you just took there.
I know.
So the question that was left for you is that what would be the last place you would visit in your life? As in, the way they explained it was that what would be the last place in your life? You could choose one place, and it was the end of your life. And you had one place to choose, and why?
This is like
to go and
dying
visit.
tomorrow.
Dying tomorrow, and you've got one place.
What place would you want to go see? Well, I'll tell you, I had the privilege of going to Antarctica 2 years ago, which blew my mind. It was fantastic, and I would love to go back. So, and I would love to go back to see the emperor penguins, which are very remote and hard to get to. Your average sort of trip down there can't get far enough south to see the colony down there. So I think, if I had to, had the week to go, I'd be like, get me on the boat.
To Antarctica. Wow.
I want to go see it. It's a remarkably beautiful, alien, wonderful place. And I love snow and ice and the wild outdoors, and it just made my heart sing.
Wow.
So I'd love to go back there.
Wow. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome. Thank you for joining us at this marvelous discussion. For all of you who are interested in contacting Alissa, you can contact her right here. Here's her LinkedIn profile and the company website. You can reach out to her and her team directly. To anybody watching out there, we are hitting remarkable numbers, but I still need more subscribe buttons. So click on that subscribe button. The more followers we get, the more entertaining, and we get great guests like Alissa on the show, as the others previously as well. So thank you for joining us. Take care. And as we always say, it takes a village to raise a chip. So keep innovating. Take care. Bye for now.